Something strange is happening in the heart of the Sahel, and it should make every person who cares about African freedom sit up and take notice. After years of trying to bully the revolution with sanctions and threats, the West has suddenly changed its tune. From late 2025 into this year of 2026, we are seeing a massive wave of diplomatic visits and financial promises directed at the Alliance of Sahel States. The very people who were called dictators and outcasts just yesterday are now being offered seats at the table and billions in credit. It looks like kindness on the surface, but we have to ask the hard question right now. Is this a genuine hand of friendship, or is it a Trojan horse designed to stabilize the US dollar and bring our brothers back under the thumb of the old colonial masters? Here we are at a crossroads where the soul of a continent is at stake. Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, has become a symbol of hope for every black man and woman across the globe who dreams of a day when Africa stands on its own 2 feet. This is no longer just about politics. In a small landlocked nation, it is about the ultimate struggle between true independence and the subtle chains of debt. The global powers are terrified because they see the old order crumbling as Traoré turns toward new partners who actually build factories and power plants instead of just printing more debt. This video is a deep look into the hidden timeline of this new soft pressure campaign and what it really means for your future and the safety of our ancestral lands. Before we dive into the details of this high-stakes game of chess, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel to stand with us in this fight for the truth. Share this with your family and friends because the world needs to hear the story of the new Africa. If you believe that our land belongs to us and that the era of being told what to do is over, I want you to type Africa Rise or Amen in the comments below to show your support for the revolution. To understand where we are going, we must first look back at the trail of breadcrumbs left by those who used to ignore us. For decades, the playbook of the West was simple. If an African leader did not bow down, they were isolated, sanctioned, or worse. But something shifted in the final months of 2025 that should have every strategic mind in the diaspora paying close attention. We saw a series of moves that looked like separate events, but when you lay them out on a map, it reveals a sophisticated campaign of soft pressure designed to pull the Alliance of Sahel States, or the AES, back into a trap they just escaped from. Between October 2025 and February 2026, the United States, the European Union, and the IMF have made at least 7 major diplomatic moves toward Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Why now? Why are they suddenly sending their highest level envoys to talk to men they previously labeled as military juntas? The answer lies in the shifting sands of global power. The West realized that their old methods of threats and fuel blockades were not breaking the will of Ibrahim Traoré or his brothers in arms. Instead of surrender, the AES did something the West never expected. They looked east. They welcomed Russia for security and China for infrastructure, and suddenly the Western monopoly on African influence began to evaporate like mist in the Sahara. This timeline of deception started with a very technical and boring move that most people missed. In October 2025, a group called the FATF, which is a global financial watchdog based in Paris, decided to remove Burkina Faso from its gray list. For those who do not follow the world of high finance, being on the gray list is like being in a financial prison. It makes it hard for a country to receive international money or do business with global banks. By taking Burkina Faso off this list, the West was essentially unlocking the cell door. But don't be fooled. They didn't do this because they suddenly started loving the people of Burkina Faso. They did it because you cannot sell a golden cage to someone if the door is still locked. They needed to open the banking channels so that their influence could flow back in. As we moved into January 2026, the pace quickened. The United States State Department signaled a massive recalibration of its foreign policy. For the first time in years, they stopped talking only about elections and started talking about pragmatic cooperation. This is code for "we will overlook your revolution if you stop talking to the Russians." They sent a top envoy, a man named Nick Checker, to Bamako. This was the highest level visit since the relations between the US and Mali collapsed years ago. Think about the irony here. For years, they refused to even acknowledge the legitimacy of these leaders, but now they are flying across the Atlantic to sit in their offices. This is a battle for the heart of the Sahel. The West sees that they are losing the resource war. They see that the minerals and the gold and the strategic land are now being protected by AES soldiers who are no longer taking orders from Paris or Washington. When you see a diplomat smiling and offering a handshake in Bamako or Ouagadougou, you must look at their other hand. What are they hiding behind their back? Is it a promise of peace, or is it a contract that will mortgage the future of the next generation? See, imagine an elder in a village who has spent his entire life working a piece of land only to have a stranger come by with a fancy suit and a briefcase full of papers. The stranger tells the elder that he wants to help him modernize his farm and offers him a loan with small print that the elder cannot see. This is exactly what is happening on a national scale. The timeline of deception is the West, trying to find a new way to get back into the bedroom of African sovereignty after being kicked out the front door. They are using a soft option because the hard option failed. The hard option was the jihadist threats that miraculously seem to increase whenever a country tries to be independent. The hard option was the sanctions that tried to starve the people. But the people of the Sahel proved they would rather eat one meal a day in freedom than feast in a cage. So now the diplomats come with soft words and the promise of security cooperation. They say they want to help fight the very insurgents that many believe were fueled by Western destabilization in the first place. It is a classic case of the arsonist coming back to sell you a fire extinguisher. The U.S. strategy in 2026 is now focused on one goal above all else: countering the presence of Russia and China. They are terrified of the Africa Corps and the Chinese infrastructure projects that are actually putting bricks in the ground. While the West offers consultations and capacity building, the East is offering power plants and security. To keep the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, the West needs to control the commodities of Africa. If the AES stays independent and trades in other currencies, it is a direct hit to the American wallet and the global financial order. This is why the timeline is so crowded with visits right now. It is a desperate scramble to stay relevant in a world that is moving on without them. As we move through the rest of this story, we will see how this timeline leads directly to the doors of the IMF, and why the billions being offered are the most dangerous weapons ever pointed at Ibrahim Traoré's revolution. We must stay awake. We must remember that those who colonize your mind through debt are more dangerous than those who try to colonize your land through force. The revolution in the Sahel is a light for the whole world, and the West is trying to blow it out with a breeze of empty promises. Now let us look at the real price of these smiles and handshakes, because in the world of global power, nothing is ever truly free. To understand the danger, we must look at the life of someone like Musa, a 45-year-old father living on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. Musa has lived through the empty promises of the past decades, where he saw his country's wealth being shipped away while his children went to bed hungry. For the first time in his life, Musa feels a spark of hope because he sees Ibrahim Traoré standing tall and telling the world that Burkina Faso is no longer for sale. But as Musa walks to the market and sees the prices of basic goods fluctuating, he is exactly the kind of person the Western financial institutions are targeting with their latest scheme. They know that if they can make life just a little bit harder for the common man and then show up with a briefcase full of cash, they might be able to turn the people against their own revolution. In October 2025, as we mentioned, the financial watchdog known as the ATF removed Burkina Faso from its gray list. This was the first step in creating what I call the golden handcuffs. You see, when a country is on that gray list, the West treats it like a pariah. They make it impossible for banks to move money, and they choke the economy until the people are desperate. By removing Burkina Faso from this list, they were essentially saying the door is now open for the IMF to come back in. And right on cue, by early February 2026, an IMF mission was sitting down in the palace with President Traore. They came with praises for remarkable progress and strong economic management. It is funny how quickly they go from calling a leader a coup plotter to calling him a remarkable manager when they realize they can no longer control him through force. The IMF is not just a bank, it is the financial wing of Western foreign policy. When the United States wants to influence a country but doesn't want to send soldiers, they send the IMF. The move they made on February 4th, 2026 was a masterclass in deception. They talked about a new resilience and sustainability facility and extended credit programs. These are fancy words designed to people of the Sahel are fighting a life and death struggle against terrorists. The IMF wants to sit in an office in Washington and decide how much money Burkina Faso can spend on the weapons needed to protect its own citizens. This is the ultimate trap. If the AES signs these agreements, they will be locked into a system where every major decision has to be approved by a board of directors in the West. It starts with a loan to help the economy, but it ends with the West demanding that the AES reduce its reliance on Russian security and Chinese infrastructure. They will tell Traore that if he wants the next installment of the loan, he must stop the nuclear energy projects that Rosatom is building. They will tell him he must stop buying military hardware from Moscow and go back to the days when Africa had to beg for used equipment that didn't even work. This is how they plan to dismantle the revolution from the inside out. They want to replace the fire of independence with the cold, damp blanket of debt. We also see this struggle through the eyes of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. There are brilliant African minds living in New York, London, and Paris who are watching this very closely. They have seen how the West uses these financial tools to keep our continent in a state of permanent development, where we are always developing but never actually developed. These intellectuals are warning the leadership in the Sahel that getting back in bed with the IMF is like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. It might feel good for a second, but it will eventually kill you. The West is terrified that if the AES succeeds in building a self-sustaining economy with the help of Russia and China, the rest of Africa will follow. If the CFA franc falls and if the US dollar is no longer the king of African trade, the entire Western financial empire will begin to shake. The IMF praised Burkina Faso for getting off the gray list, but we have to ask, what was the cost? To get off that list, you have to allow Western supervisors to look into your banking system and your financial records. It is a form of legalized spying. They want to know exactly where the money is going and who is getting paid. They want to ensure that the wealth of the land is still flowing through channels that they can monitor and control. This is a game of chess played at the highest level. The West has realized that the people of the Sahel are too brave to be defeated by jihadists and too proud to be defeated by sanctions. So they are trying to defeat them with generosity. Let us be very clear about what is happening here. The West is not worried about poverty in Africa. If they were worried about poverty, they wouldn't have spent 60 years draining the continent of its gold, its oil, and its people. They are worried about control. They see Russia's Africa Corps providing real security that actually allows farmers to return to their fields. They see China building roads and bridges that connect our cities. They see the nuclear deals that will finally bring electricity to every village. A powerless country is a poor country, and the West wants to keep Africa in the dark so they can continue to steal our resources under the cover of night. By offering these billions, the IMF is trying to pull the plug on the new energy that is surging through the Sahel. They will try to frame this as social spending and poverty reduction. They will tell the world that they are helping the people of Burkina Faso. But we know the truth. The price of their help is our sovereignty. They want to create a situation where if Ibrahim Traoré or Assimi Goïta says something they don't like, they can simply click a button in Washington and freeze the entire economy. They want a remote control for African revolutions. This is why they are so desperate to get back into the room. They are losing their grip and they know it. So I ask you, the viewer especially, those of you who have seen how these institutions have treated our people for generations, can we ever truly trust a bank that only wants to help us when we start looking for other friends? Why was the IMF not this eager to help when the terrorists were at the gates of our capital cities? Why now only when we have found new partners who treat us like equals? The answer is as old as time. They don't want to help us stand up. They want to make sure we are still leaning on them so they can choose which way we fall. We must stand behind the leadership of the AES as they navigate these dangerous waters. The golden handcuffs are being polished and prepared, but the spirit of Thomas Sankara and the strength of the African people will not be so easily chained again. If you want to know who your true friends are, do not look at their words, look at their hands and see what they are building. The Sahel has become the most important chessboard in the world today, and the players are making moves that will decide the fate of our children for the next 100 years. On one side, you have the old colonial powers and their financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. On the other side, you have the new partners like Russia and China. To the west, the Sahel is a place of security threats and instability that needs to be managed. But to the leadership of the AES and their new allies, it is a land of massive potential that is finally waking up from a long sleep. Let us look at what is actually happening on the ground, because this is where the paper promises of the West fall apart. For decades, the West sent advisors and consultants who lived in five-star hotels and wrote reports about poverty. But while they were writing reports, the infrastructure was crumbling and the lights were going out. Now look at the partnership between the AES and Russia. We are not just talking about soldiers and guns. We are talking about the future of energy. Rosatom, the Russian nuclear giant, has already signed deals with Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to build nuclear power plants. In less than a decade, the Sahel could be powered by clean, reliable nuclear energy. This is a game changer because, as we always say, a powerless country is a poor country. You cannot build factories, you cannot process your own minerals, and you cannot create jobs for the youth if you are relying on expensive fuel or broken grids. Russia is offering the keys to industrialization. They are helping the AES build the foundation of a modern economy that does not depend on Western approval. And then there is China. While the West is busy lecturing African leaders about democracy and transparency, Chinese engineers are on the ground building roads, bridges, and digital infrastructure. They are investing in the very things that move an economy forward. They are not asking for the right to oversee the national budget or dictate social policies. They are making business deals that result in physical assets that the people of the Sahel can see and use. This is the visible engagement that the West simply cannot match. When the IMF comes with its billions in early 2026, it is not offering to build a nuclear plant. It is not offering to pave thousands of miles of highway. It is offering credit. It is offering paper that allows you to buy things from the West while staying in debt to the West. It is a system designed to keep us as consumers of their goods rather than producers of our own. The US and the EU are terrified of this shift because they know that once Africa can power itself and move its own goods, the era of cheap African resources is over. They will no longer be able to dictate the price of gold or uranium if the AES has the power to process those resources at home. The West is also playing a dangerous game with the coastal countries of West Africa. They are tightening their grip on nations like Nigeria, Ghana, and Benin Republic. They are turning these countries into staging grounds to watch the AES. They want to create a ring of pressure around the revolution. I said the plan is simple. If they cannot control the heart of the Sahel, from the inside they will try to choke it from the outside using the coastal neighbors. This is why we see US boots on the ground in Nigeria and French influence growing in Benin. They are preparing for the hard option if this soft diplomatic campaign fails. But Ibrahim Traoré and his brothers are playing a different game. They are building a self-reliant bloc that bypasses the old routes. They are looking at the map and seeing a way to connect the Sahel directly to the world without going through the gatekeepers of the past. This is why the West is so desperate to get back into the room. They see the Africa Corps providing a security umbrella that actually works, allowing for these economic projects to take root. They see that for the first time in history, the scramble for Africa is being met by an Africa that is ready to scramble back. While the battle for sovereignty is being fought in the dust and heat of the Sahel, there is another front in this war, the battle for the mind. This is where the African diaspora plays a critical role. All across the world, from the streets of Harlem to the boardrooms of London and Paris, there are millions of our brothers and sisters who carry the wisdom of the world but keep their hearts anchored in the soil of the motherland. These are the doctors, the engineers, and the financial analysts who have seen the Western system from the inside. They are sending a loud and clear warning back to Ouagadougou and Bamako. Do not let the smiling diplomacy of 2026 blind you to the reality of history. The diaspora has seen this movie before. They remember how leaders like Patrice Lumumba or Thomas Sankara were first approached with cooperation and development aid before the shadows closed in. Today, intellectual groups in the diaspora are warning that the IMF's praise for Ibrahim Traoré's economic management is a psychological tactic. By validating the revolution's success, the West is trying to gain the trust of the leadership so they can eventually introduce adjustments that will slow down the march toward total independence. They know that if they can convince the AES to take just one major loan, they have a foot in the door to sabotage the entire project. We must also look at the darker scenarios that lie ahead if this soft option fails. The West is not used to losing, and they have a very long memory. If the diplomatic visits from men like Nick Checker and the billion-dollar bait from the IMF do not pull the AES back into the Western orbit, we must be prepared for the return of the hard approach. We are already seeing the signs. Look at the coastal countries again. Why is there a sudden increase in joint military exercises in countries bordering the AES? Why are the old colonial masters suddenly so interested in the security of Benin and Ivory Coast? The blueprint for the future could involve a strategy of encirclement. If the West cannot control the leadership of Burkina Faso or Mali, they will try to create enough internal and external pressure to make the revolution collapse. This could include orchestrated fuel shortages, the funding of opposition groups disguised as civil society, or even the tragic use of proxy forces to create chaos on the borders. They want to show the world that life outside the Western financial system is impossible. They want to make an example out of the AES so that no other African nation dares to follow in their footsteps. But there is a different scenario, a brighter one that depends on our collective strength. If the AES stays the course, refuses the toxic gifts of the IMF, and continues to build tangible partnerships with the East, we are looking at the birth of a new Africa. Imagine a 2030 where the Sahel is the energy hub of the continent, powered by the nuclear plants Russia is helping to build. Imagine a regional economy where we trade in our own currencies, backed by the very gold and minerals that the West is currently trying to steal through debt. This is the price of failure that the West fears the most. They fear an Africa that doesn't need them. The question of justice versus injustice is at the heart of every decision made in 2026. Is it just for a bank in Washington to decide how many schools can be built in a village in Burkina Faso? Is it just for a foreign power to tell an African president who he can buy security from? The emotional enemy here is the system that treats African nations like children who cannot manage their own house. We must recognize that the billions being offered by the IMF are not for our development. They are for their protection. They are protecting the US dollar's dominance and the Western world's lifestyle, which has been built on the back of cheap African resources for centuries. I think the price of failure for the AES would be a return to the dark days of puppet leaders and resource exploitation. It would mean that the blood shed by the martyrs of this revolution was in vain. But the price of success is a future where our children do not have to cross dangerous seas in search of a better life. The diaspora is ready to bring their skills and their capital back to a free Sahel. They are waiting for the signal that the revolution has survived the soft trap and is ready to build the infrastructure of a superpower. As we move toward the conclusion of this analysis, we must stay vigilant. The West will continue to recalibrate. They will offer more money, more prizes, and more diplomatic breakthroughs. But we must keep our eyes on the goal. True sovereignty is not found in a loan agreement. It is found in the power to say no to anyone who tries to put a price tag on our freedom. The fight for the Sahel is the fight for the soul of Africa. And in this game of high-stakes chess, the next move belongs to the people. We have reached the final crossroads of this journey, and the choice is now as clear as the sun rising over the savannah. The The West has shown its hand by trying to buy with gold what it could not take with iron. We have unmasked the timeline of deception from late 2025 to this very moment in 2026, revealing the true face of the IMF and the diplomatic envoys who come with smiles but carry the same old chains of dependency. Ibrahim Traoré and the leaders of the AES are at a defining moment that will be written in the history books for 1,000 years. Will they accept the crumbs of the old masters? Or will they continue to bake their own bread with the help of partners who finally respect our dignity and our right to industrialize? The struggle we are witnessing is not just about a few $billion or a line of credit. It is a struggle for the very right to exist as a free and sovereign people. For too long, our continent has been treated like a playground for those who did not have our best interests at heart. But today, the youth of Africa and our brothers in the diaspora are watching with eyes wide open. We refuse to be fooled by recalibrated policies that only seek to protect the US dollar and Western pensions while our people are expected to remain in perpetual debt. The soft approach is merely a different mask for the same old face of control. If you stand with Ibrahim Traoré and if you believe that the Alliance of Sahel States is the bridge to a truly independent and powerful Africa, then I need you to make your voice heard right now. Do not let the algorithm silence the truth of this revolution. Hit the like button and share this video with every single person you know who loves our motherland and wants to see her succeed. If you are new to this channel, subscribe and ring that bell to join this growing movement of truth seekers who refuse to be silenced by mainstream propaganda. Now we come to our closing ritual. This is for the true believers who carry the fire of the revolution in their hearts and the hope of our ancestors in their souls. I want you to go down to the comment section right now and type "I'm in" or "Africa Rise." Let the world see a wall of support that no amount of Western debt or IMF pressure can ever break. Let us show the global powers that we are united, that we are awake, and that our sovereignty is not for sale at any price. May the ancestors guide our leaders with wisdom, and may the light of freedom and prosperity shine over every village from Ouagadougou to the ends of the earth. We are the masters of our fate. We are the architects of the new Africa. I am your host, and I will see you in the next one. Stand tall, stay vigilant, and stay free.